It's not hey you.
Yeah.
Hey, it's another point for us today.
Yeah.
Brenden, make sure you share this on your social media, please, as the lovely and talented Brenden Nunes. That's not how you pronounce it.
No.
Joining us. Good morning. How are you, Brenden?
Morning. I will help out with points in any way I can.
Yes.
Put my social media, our social media, all of the above.
Oh, we're on a run.
We're
Every other show needs a timeout.
Also, are we Chris, you're the suit in here. Are we gonna get some sort of like weekly scoring update?
Yes, supposed to.
We better be ahead.
Yeah.
That's really all that matters.
That's all right.
So
thank you, Brenden.
Thank you, Brenden. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you next week. Give us your preview. I am very worried about tomorrow's.
They said they're getting mollywopped.
I think they're going to get mollywopped. And I even said to back it up, I said, look, obviously I hope I'm wrong. I'm not trying to be Davey Downer here. And this is one of those times where I will allow for a moral victory Monday if it's even a good game and it's in single digits at the end. I will come on Monday and I will not be a downer about the game, but I'm really worried Houston's got it in for us come tomorrow, whenever it is.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, Houston has been, I guess they've recovered somewhat from their slumping stage now, 5-5 in their last 10, but obviously a really good defensive team. And those are the teams that worry me with the Kings, because the Kings are just all offense. And to be honest, they can't really defend anyone. And so if you're a bad offensive team, you still feel like you can probably score against the Houston Rockets or against the Sacramento Kings, as long as you're not the Utah Jazz, really. Yeah. So, I think that it's reasonable to be concerned about the potential outcome. Sure that they beat Houston a couple times this year, but it's a completely new look team right now. But both teams will have a decent bit of motivation. I just don't feel the greatest about the length athleticism that Houston provides. I think the real advantage would probably have to be in the paint with Şengün. And, we've seen them do well with obviously Domas in that aspect, but Valanciunas and some of these other guys getting to the basket, obviously less so from the perimeter, but more from the bigs. But I think that that's the advantage that you have to try to capitalize on, but definitely lean towards you that I'm not the most optimistic coming into this one.
Brenden, I think you said it basically there in the answer, kind of concerned about the Kings defense. We had this question yesterday where they held Charlotte to a season low for the Kings, 88. They held Utah to 101. I think they're 10-0 now when they've held teams to 101 or less. But it really feels like that was an undermanned Charlotte team and an undermanned Utah team. And I think that's what you're going to say anyway. But are there any signs of some optimism on the Kings defense right now?
I mean, I like Keon Ellis. I've liked Keon Ellis for a while.
That's a sign.
It's something. I like what Markel Fultz brings a little bit in that aspect.
Okay.
I would say Jake LaRavia, Keegan Murray all fall into that. And, there's a big difference between having 4 and having 2, I would say. So you can put out some intriguing defensive lineups, but you're trading off offense, obviously. And I'm a person that always thinks, like, if you're not that well balanced and you have a clear strength, then make sure to lean into that and don't try to clean up your weaknesses and lose out on your strengths in the process. So, as much as the Kings did play a part in Jordan Clarkson going 1 of 14, he also airballed 2 wide open threes, and that Charlotte team was also missing some decent looks. So you have to beat the teams that you're supposed to. I don't think that's something that we could always say about this team this year, mainly last year. So they still do deserve credit for that, but definitely have to take it with a grain of salt. I don't feel the most optimistic about this team because, the whole Keon Ellis conversation of who closes games, again, it's like, well, you have all this offensive firepower that you kind of need on the floor, I think. And that's what makes this a tough scenario and just not a very good defensive team, which, I mean, how long have we been saying that?
Yeah. Who's the guy in the Rockets that scares you the most for the Kings?
Scares me? I love Amen Thompson. I'll say that.
That was my pick.
Like, and as he gets more comfortable, the athleticism is ridiculous. If they try to have Keon Ellis play, because last game they tried to put Malik Monk next to other, I guess, point guards, I'll put in quotations. Markel Fultz falls into that, but Keon Ellis, Keon Ellis should not try to take the ball up against the Houston Rockets, is all I'll say. Because Amen Thompson is an absolute pest, athletic as heck, and they need to be diving after loose balls because that is 100% what Houston is going to be doing out there. Dylan Brooks always is a guy that gets under the skin of some guys, but I think that DeMar DeRozan picks up his game a little bit in those moments. So I would say the perimeter defense and how that may limit Zach LaVine specifically in the form of Amen Thompson, but they have a handful of guys on that roster.
Do you know what his middle name is?
His middle name?
Yeah, Amen Thompson shares it with his brother. Not doing a bit.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
His middle name and Asar Thompson's middle name, both the middle names are excellence, spelled XLNC. That is a fact. You can look it up on Wikipedia. And now you've gained something from doing this spot. You now know their middle names are both excellence. Yeah, back to you, Jim.
Misspelled, though.
It is misspelled.
Yeah. Brenden, here's another one for you. I'm going back to the defense. So which is more likely to happen? The Kings become a good defensive team. I don't even know what that term would look like, but I think what we would all say, man, the defense has really improved by the end of the season, or the Kings successfully execute a lob pass. How bad have they been on those lately?
Yeah, I mean, the lobs have been really, really bad. And Malik Monk said that, they'll try to clean it up best that they can. He sort of took responsibility for it. And then there's also moments where like Keegan Murray took it in transition, and then there's other guys behind him and he took it by himself. And I'm like, well, it seemed to be making the wrong decision a lot in transition there, but I would definitely say a lob pass because we've seen lob passes throughout the years, and I don't think we've seen much defense throughout the years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, is that something they just practice? Like, I want them to be able, like, any Zach LaVine team has to be able to lob. Like,
you let him finish.
Yes, you have to do it. But like, they're like lob drills and practices. Like, how do you do it? They got to figure that out somehow.
No, like you can't just fully go away from it, right? Like it gives you energy as a team, especially at home. It really pumps up the crowd. You can't just go away from that.
You were talking about kind of the finishing lineup too, Brenden, with Keon. That is, I mean, it is a trick. It is a puzzle for them. What do you think is the best look, or is it kind of a case-by-case, game-by-game basis? Because if you do put him in, there's sound logic to have Keon in on the floor at the end of a game. But then, as we know, it's either, well, it wouldn't be Sabonis, but it's either Keegan, DeMar, Zach, or Malik going to the bench. How would you kind of approach that for the Kings?
Yeah, just to kind of go down the line, I don't really think it can be DeMar DeRozan because I think he's your closer in those scenarios, and you have to have that guy out there in my mind. Starting lineup may be a different case, but closing, I think that DeMar needs to be out there. And Keegan is too much of a lateral move in my mind, actually probably even a step down because of the size and the rebounding. And like you mentioned, no Domas. So it kind of comes down to Zach LaVine or Malik Monk. And I don't think it's a hard question of who's the better player between the two. I think it's easily Zach LaVine. And so if you are slotting Keon into that closing lineup, I think it's in favor of Malik Monk. You have enough other distributors, scorers, creators out there that if you were looking to lean into more perimeter defense in those moments, I think that it has to be Malik.
I've noticed the last two games, especially against Charlotte. Charlotte's where I first picked it up because before the game, there was this weird thing where like Ellis was wearing a black starter jersey and everybody freaked out in practice. And then Doug was asked, hey, is there a starting lineup change? And he's like, you'll find out in 12 minutes. And then there wasn't a change, but then Malik subbed, or Ellis subbed for Malik. Like, I think it was 5 minutes into the game. And then there was another early sub, I believe, in the last game as well. Do you think, has there been a leash tightening? Has there been some sort of change behind the scenes? Maybe not in starting, but it seems like Ellis is certainly knocking on the door.
Yeah, I think that it's a formula that Doug is still trying to figure out. It essentially, taking Malik out early and subbing in Keon was essentially what they were doing with the De'Aaron Fox rotation. And I felt like it kind of fit into that. And then yesterday's game or day before, whatever it is, they kind of all blend, as you guys know. It ends up being Zach LaVine that he takes out first, and they let Malik Monk rock for a little while there. So I think that Doug is still trying to figure out his rotations here, but there's definitely an emphasis on like Keon needs to be out there. I think that it's very obvious the impact that he brings. I think that he has more limitations sometimes that fans can overlook at certain times, but certainly the catch and shoot threes, the perimeter defense being top of the league, around top of the league in deflections. I think that you need to have him out there a little bit more. And the reality is like Malik Monk has not been great recently. Like I think back to a few games ago where he had 10 assists and 5 turnovers. And I feel like that's the perfect example of what it's been so far. Like I believe will continue to get better as a playmaker, but this is not his natural role. It's not his natural mindset, obviously, as a little bit more of a scorer out there. So I think that he could get better, but I think there's a lot of times, and Keon is familiar with a lot of these starters, aside from Zach LaVine, obviously. So I think that Doug is still very much trying to figure out his rotations. Even Domantas Sabonis usually plays the entire first quarter, and in last game, Jonas Valanciunas comes in a little bit earlier. So a lot of rotational things that I think is a combination of the roster looking different and the coaching staff trying to figure out what that looks like.
Just want to follow up with an impossible question, but just do your best. In your opinion, if Keon Ellis was a lottery pick, would he be starting right now? Is there what I'm leaning towards, Brenden? That's what I'm saying. But I'm wondering if Keon Ellis is
it that or contract? Is it like if he had a big contract?
But I feel like it kind of all that all ties in. Is there a little Brock Purdying going on with Keon Ellis, where you've got the big contract with Monk, you've got the guy who wasn't drafted in Keon Ellis? Like, I just wonder if Ellis was the 8th pick 2 years ago or whatever, if we're even having this conversation right now.
To totally loophole here, I'll say yes, because if Keon was a lottery pick, he's a much better player than he is right now. And he's probably somebody that would have been able to put the ball on the floor a little bit. I mentioned like the limitations. And again, I'm a huge Keon Ellis guy. I love what he brings out there. But like I said earlier, like you don't really want him bringing the ball up the floor. I think that we've seen him get hounded before. I think it actually may have been Houston earlier this year or last year where it was most glaring as well. The finishing around the rim at times, he was certainly somebody that threw some questionable lobs in that last game. So I don't think so, because I also think, to your point of, the optics of it, it's just as tough with everybody else in that starting lineup. Obviously, DeMar, Keegan being that lottery pick, Zach is the guy you just sort of hitch your wagon to. It's hard to move off him. And I guess, again, Malik Monk probably being the easiest one to replace there, but you really are selling the organization or the fan base almost on, no, this is our point guard. Like, we had this plan for him to be the point guard once we essentially move on from De'Aaron.
Brenden, one more for me, at least, on the kind of the bench and the rotation. We've seen a pretty good version of Valanciunas here the last couple of games, and I think that's something the Kings have been missing. A byproduct of that, though, less Trey Lyles. He didn't come until the second half of the game 2 games ago, but was really good and didn't play last game. Just kind of caught up in the numbers for him. Where do you think he kind of falls in line as we go forward?
Yeah, I think that you're totally right in pointing out the Valanciunas being a part of that. I think that LaRavia is a part of that as well. There's not really run at the 4 or 5 for Trey right now. And I honestly think it's justified. I think that both of those guys, LaRavia and Lyles, may be the same caliber of player, but one being offensive and one being defensive. The Kings need the complementary defensive guy with all the other firepower that they have on this team scoring the ball. So I think it makes sense to go in that direction. And you see when Keon Ellis goes out, that in that Charlotte game, that Trey Lyles ends up playing in that second half. And I think he's professional in the way that he goes about it, and will sort of stay ready. Next man up mentality, as everybody in the league loves to always say. So I think it's very much understandable. And hey, maybe we still do see small ball 5 lineups in certain scenarios where it makes sense. It was Rudy Gobert where that really, I think, shined initially when Domas fouled out, who knows how many years ago that was now. And you still have that lineup optionality where you have a jumbo lineup now, you have a small ball lineup now. And so, it's one of those things where, dare I say, they reach a postseason at some point that, you have options.
I've told you before, I have that same video game chair, right? Does it have the speakers on the side?
It does not. I used to have one like that, though.
Yeah. I didn't want it. You don't ever use them, though, right? Like the speakers. It sounds great when you buy it. Yeah, I'm with you. It's a nice chair. Same color, same blue stripe and everything. They're nice chairs. Thank you, Brenden. And please do remember to share this on social media. It's
we need the points.
Yeah, we need the points. And we'll see you. We'll see you this time next week. Hopefully, after a couple nice Kings wins, my friend. Have a good weekend.
Hopefully, appreciate it, guys.
All right, take care. It's Brenden Nunes, Sactown Sports Kings Insider.
That's him.
That is him in the flesh. We'll take a break when we come back. Mark.